Welcome to the Dave Campbell's Recruiting Roundup, where today we will be talking about the Texas Longhorns, the flagship program in this state of Texas. And as always, we've got our good friend Greg Powers over here from Next Level Athletes. And we also have a special guest on the phone, Mike Craven from over at the Austin American-Statesman. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, guys. How are y'all?
We're doing fantastic. How about you, Greg?
It's great, man. Signing day's fast approaching, and it seems like recruiting is really starting to heat up.
Yeah, now that especially the regular season's over, I mean, you're seeing a lot more commits, a lot more guys announcing. And obviously it gets to be an interesting time now that guys are starting to visit and stuff like that. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So, the Texas Longhorns ranked number 7 in the 247 composite rankings, number 1 in the Big 12, 17 commits so far, headlined by 5-star running back Bijan Robinson. And let's go ahead and start there. Mike, when you look at this class, how has the staff done up to this point? What do you think the quality of this class is at this point?
It's definitely on the offensive side of the ball. Like you mentioned, Bijan Robinson is easily the top-rated recruit in this class. I went out to Arizona at the beginning of the year and watched him, and he, be one of the best players even inside this state. It's always hard to kind of grade guys outside the state, in my opinion, because you just don't know the level of competition. But he's really good. They got Hudson Card and Jaquindon Jackson, 2 quarterbacks at winning programs, a couple of good wide receivers, and then 4 offensive linemen that are all quality. So definitely, if you're looking at the 2020 class for Texas, I think the positives and the best players are mostly on the offensive side of football.
Yeah, Greg, what do you think so far of this class? Where do you think they are right now?
Well, I really like what they've been able to do to build that foundation. Mike kind of touched on the offensive line class, and I really like the versatility and the ability to play multiple positions. You look at a guy like Jalen Garth, he's one of my favorite recruits in this cycle for them, and listed at around 6'4", 6'5", 290 pounds. People didn't get a long look at him because he was injured for his senior year, but he is a guy who could really play tackle to tackle. He could play I really feel like he could play any position up front. And those are the type of guys that you need to infuse into your program, guys who have the ability to move to a different position if their main position is already serviced by another athlete. And one thing that kind of jumps out to me is that it seems like in this cycle they've recruited guys who are playing on teams that are used to winning. And I really do feel like that's very important. You look at Jaquindon Jackson, Hudson Card's been injured, but Lake Travis has a long history of winning. Jake Majors and Prosper, they're still deep into the playoffs. Even a couple more guys on that list. But I think
South Lake Carroll, for
example.
example.
South Lake Carroll, Andres Carrick. They're guys who are well-versed to winning football games, and I think that's something that you're looking for when you're recruiting the state of Texas.
Yeah. Well, let's look at to start out with the top. I mean, now in this class, obviously, there's a lot of top-end guys. 14 guys out of the 17 are rated 4 or 5-star prospects by 247, and I'm sure that something similar in our top 100 ranking as well. Mike, let's start with you. When you look at this class, who are some of the top-end guys that you think that Texas fans need to know?
Quentin Johnston from Temple is a guy that I think goes under the radar. Temple had a weird year this year in that they didn't really throw the ball as well as normal, so he didn't put up those stats that he would if he was a wide receiver at some of the power programs that are known for passing. But he's just a freak athletically. He's 6'4". He came to a Texas camp and won like a dunk competition by doing like a 360 between his legs type dunk. So he's just a freaky kid who, if they can really maximize, could be one of those wide receivers that Texas hasn't had in a really long time to kind of demand double teams.
Well, while we have you, Mike, you put together the top 55 yourself here in the state, and you do a really good job with that list. And I wanted to ask maybe if there was an outlier for you in that class that you feel like that you really maybe feel higher on than maybe some of the other services out there who do rankings, even ourselves over here at DCTF. Is there that one guy that you feel maybe we're all missing on?
I think it was Carrick from South Lake Carroll. Before the season started, he was listed as a 3-star. I think guys are starting to come around on him. I think he moved up to a 4-star on 24/7 and should be a part of everybody's, kind of top 50 list. Now, South Lake Carroll is one of those programs where we always look at the skill guys, and Andre kind of he was only 240 pounds, I believe, as a sophomore, so he's really come a long way. And I think he's the only true offensive tackle out of those 4 guys committed on the offensive line. And then I don't know if Prince Dorba counts, but I'm really high on Prince Dorba. I think he's a Joseph Asai type player that can play defensive end, outside linebacker. I think he could even get moved inside if he gains some weight. So I think he's a clear-cut top 20 guy in this state.
As a guy who does rankings, a lot of people get caught up on that marker where you're a 3-star, you're a 4-star, and that 4th star really seems to be a indicator of a separate level of talent. But I always like to make the argument that there are a lot of really, really good 3-stars out there who are towards the top of these lists. And one of those guys for me that's on that borderline that seems to be constantly debated is Jaron Thompson at Lufkin. And what I really like about Jaron's game is that he is one of these guys who has the it factor from the leadership standpoint on the field. He seems to do a little bit of everything well. And, maybe I'm the one that's off. I think we have him rated as a 3-star. I'm not sure where everybody else has him rated. But I really like his game and feel like he's one of those guys who could make a pretty big impact in what seems to be or is perceived to be a loaded defensive backfield, because Tom Herman and his staff there have done such a great job recruiting the top defensive backs in the state.
And he enrolls early, which will really help him. And he is a hard-nosed, just straight-out football player. And anybody who watches Texas's defense on a weekly basis knows they lack dudes that just want to hit and play some football. And he's one of those guys that you get into the locker room, and it raises everybody around him, because if you don't match that physicality, you're going to get left behind or you're going to get hurt. And so I think he's a guy that doesn't get enough praise in this class as well.
Maybe we'd both agree that the deep sleeper is Dejon Harrison.
Yeah, and that's, to me, as long as he plays slot receiver, I know he's listed as an athlete. And so, if he plays defensive side, I think there's some learning curve there that I don't know how to grade for.
Right.
But if we're assuming he plays slot receiver, I mean, I don't know how he's a 3-star. He can do everything on a football field. He doesn't have the size, but most slot guys don't. So, playing at Hutto maybe hurts him. I know the Austin area doesn't get as much recruiting shine as a lot of places. So he's going to be a guy that can play right away. And in Herman's system, I mean, they love slot receivers. So he's going to put up some stats.
Yeah, well, and Greg, you mentioned when you look at our top 100, we have very clear criteria. The top 50 players in the state right now are 4-star prospects, but you look at right on the edge of that, like you mentioned, Jaron Thompson, Jake Majors, Ty Jordan. Those are 3 guys who are in that next 10, and I think it's good that you bring it up. Just because we don't rate somebody a 4-star prospect doesn't mean that there's this huge gap. It's just where they end up, right?
Right, and that's kind of something that we did here at DCTF, is just kind of set that mark. As if you're in the top 50, you're a 4-star. If you're in the top 5, you're going to eventually end up being a 5-star, because it kind of answers the question, I think, in a clear-cut way, where you can just say, what makes this kid a 4-star? Well, he's rated within the top 50. That's your clear answer, because there is no real definitive answer as to what separates a guy from a 4-star and a 3-star, because you look at that top 100 list and you go all the way up to 75 or 85 names, and those guys are just every bit as good as the guy who's rated at number 35. So there isn't ever an easy answer to define what a 4-star is. So we try to do it. It's not a perfect solution to the problem, because inherently you have Jaron Thompson and Ty Jordan, guys who you feel like are 4-star players who are rated as 3-stars. Some tough calls have to be made, but that's why we decided to go in that direction.
Well, and one thing that I'll ask is, right now, we only have 4 players right now rated as 5-star prospects, being Zach Evans, Damon Demas, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Haynes King in the state, to be clear. When you look at this Texas class, do you think that there are any guys in the state of Texas that have the potential to get knocked up to a 5-star later on?
Well, I mean, Jaquindon Jackson's been rated within that top 5 the whole time. He's committed to Texas. He could play quarterback. He could play safety. He may bulk up and be a linebacker. He could play wide receiver. Maybe he's a running back. I mean, he could do everything. We have him rated as the number 1 athlete in the state. I like him as a potential quarterback personally, just for everything that he's been able to do. You have Drew Sanders and Jalen Jones. I think those are the top 3 in the running for that 5th star right now as we look at it, and there happen to be number 5, number 6, and number 7. I think the interesting debate becomes Haynes King sitting at number 4 didn't have the season that we expected him to have. They got bounced out of the playoffs early. Does one of these guys, based around a potential playoff run, and Drew Sanders and Jaquindon Jackson are both still in the playoffs, move up enough to bounce him down to number 6 or number 7 on the list, and does he lose his 5th star as a result? I think that's a healthy debate that we'll have all the way into February.
So when you look at this, sorry, go ahead.
Here's my thing about Jaquindon Jackson. I don't know where his highest upside is in a position. All I know is that since he's been playing varsity football, I've never seen a game that he wasn't the best player in. And that includes that North Shore game last year that had about 40 kids that are eventually going to be college football players. To me, he's just one of those alpha football players that is going to figure it out, whether it's at quarterback or another position. He's going to be one of those dudes that is playing football for a long time because he's just simply built to be one.
Well, Mike, when you look at the staff changes at Texas, obviously switching out both coordinators, losing a wide receivers coach, maybe losing some more defensive assistants, how is that going to impact the next couple of weeks?
See, here, the early signing period has changed everything. You know, a lot of this recruiting goes on in the spring and in the summer, and I'm not sure how much the senior year really comes into play at a school like Texas, where they get to kind of pick who they want to pick for, you know, relatively the, you know, most part. 7 of the 17 are moving in a month. So for them, it's really hard for an early enrollees to really start looking at other schools because you have to make that decision about your next 4 or 5 years of life pretty quickly. So with playoffs and how the early signing period in the state kind of runs up into the state championship, I think it's the 2021 class that is probably more impacted about what's going on in the staff changes than the guys already committed, because for most of them, they've been able to look at any programs they had offers from earlier. So as long as Tom Herman stays there, I believe they're committed to the University of Texas as much as they are to any of the coordinators or coaching staff guys that are just assistants.
One thing that I found very interesting was the new extended offer to Sawyer Gorham Welch at Longview, and I kind of look at this offer as an indicator that maybe Tom Herman's vision for the defensive side of the football could be a 4-man front. I think that Sawyer is a guy who would probably play well in a 4-man front. I know he has versatility, could probably play in any scheme, but maybe that's a tip of the hand, so to speak, of what direction they may be going, in that defensive coordinator search. I don't know, just some speculation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, right? I've always compared coaching searches to girlfriends, and you're never going to hire the exact same thing you just fired. So there's no way that they're going to go to another odd man front, or they could have just kept Todd Orlando to do that. So I think they go to a 4-man front, and, Longview kid picked up an offer mostly because Van Fillinger from Utah decommitted. I mean, that happened the day after. So I think that was just a recoup a number type situation.
Okay, let's finish out with this, Mike. When you look at the landscape right now, only 17 commits so far in this 2020 class. What are some of the guys, and who are some of the guys, rather, who you think Texas could potentially target and land in the next coming weeks?
The top target is Alfred Collins. He plays at Bastrop Cedar Creek, which is just outside of Austin. He's a defensive lineman with, pretty much anybody anybody is involved in that one. He's one of the, higher rated prospects in the state. Calvante Dixon from Carthage, who's still in the playoffs. Texas really likes him at slot receiver. He was committed to Arkansas before the Chad Morris stuff went down, and his brother is Keontae Ingram at Texas, so the Longhorns feel pretty good about them. The defensive lineman that Greg just mentioned from Longview is a guy that they want to flip from Oklahoma State. And then outside of the state, they really love Keely Ringo, a cornerback in Arizona. He's the top-rated cornerback in the nation, but Georgia is in the lead there.
Do you have any indication at all, Mike, if Texas is still kicking the tires on Jaquandis Burns, former Dallas area guy who played at IMG Academy for his senior year?
Yeah, I mean, they still want him. They still would like him to be part of the class. I know Baylor, Utah, a couple of schools are, also in that mix. And yeah, I mean, he's weird because he's from Terrell. I mean, he's a Texas kid, even though it says IMG Academy. So they need linebackers, and, they would take as many as possible. What's interesting about this class for Texas is they love 2021. And so a lot of this is being done they don't want to just take guys to fill up this class because they feel like they can get 27, 28 really good players next cycle. And so it'll be interesting to see if they try to just fill class just to get some spots, or if they save those scholarships, go grad transfer, and then save those for 2021 and really sign a huge class next year.
That's Mike Craven over from the Awesome American Statesman. You can follow him on Twitter at CravenMike. You can find his work at hookem.com. Mike, Greg, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back with you guys again next week.